Good afternoon. I'd like to call the City Council meeting of September 22nd, 2015 to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Francisco. Here. Hart. Here. Hotchkiss. Here. Murillo. Here. Rouse. Here. White. Here. Mayor Snyder.
Here. Okay, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, public comment. We have a number of speaker slips. There's 2 minutes here at the podium. We'll start with Roberta Ann Bernard, and to be followed by Reverend Alan Hayes. Come on up. And you have a handout here I'll pass along.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
My name is Roberta Ann Bernard, and I've been resident here for 12 years, 70 years old. And I'm a grandma of 6 grandkids, 13 and under. Done thousands of hours of volunteer work here in Santa Barbara and started a nonprofit. I'm the original director of a nonprofit. And my last 5 years of life, I'm here to talk to you about the mentally ill. The last time was this July 17th. I was sitting at Pete's and up by their sidewalk, guy sitting next to me, and this gal that's well known on State Street. It was about 12:30 on a Friday afternoon. Came by. I was on my earphones on the smartphone and just was having a meltdown, cussing and screaming and hollering at us. Well, that happens down State Street. She went over to him and took the chair and threw it into his table and chair. Came back and picked up my heavy porcelain teapot and threw it at my head against the wall. And she stormed off. An hour later, I won't get into all the details. An hour later, I'm cleaning up my face. I'd been through a mentally ill guy who I'd had to get a Klutz order of protection against. For 3.5 years, I went to civil and then to the DA to try to enforce it. Too many details. It kind of opens up. Sorry. And so I went and cleaned up my face. I'd been crying, and I didn't expect anything to happen. Mentally ill seemed to be protected here. Not in the malls for some reason, but down State Street. So I went and cleaned up my face. Police didn't want to take a statement from the guy. She took a statement from me. Please. Okay, I'll move on. And so cleaned up my face, walked down State Street, and across from Anderson's. It must be about 1:30 now in the afternoon. She came out of just nowhere and grabbed my smartphone out of my hand, smashed it on the ground on the sidewalk, and took me by the head under here. She knows how to fight, I guess, because I think if she'd got me by the hair back here, I think I'd have had some leverage, but probably not.
You do need to wind up. You're way past your time.
Hauled me around like a rag doll and threw me on the ground, galleries of people watching. So I was in the ER room 8 hours, the hospital another 13. She was in and out of...
You are way past your 2 minutes.
Okay.
We have your statement, and I've passed it around, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I had 3 questions on the end that I'd really like to have answered at some time. Thank you.
Reverend Alan Hayes will be followed by Ethan David Shankman.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members. My name is Reverend Alan Haynes. I've been here working with your homeless and differently housed population here for about 1.5 years now. My calling is street minister, and I found a lot of work here. I've been informed by a friend of mine, Mr. Lloyd Walker, that he's been approached by members of this council regarding the Thursday employees dinner at the park and a possible meeting we might get to have with you at that time. I'm just basically here today to encourage you to do one thing before that time, if you are able. And that is to consider you're going to be addressing members of a very foreign population. Foreign to you, to your experience. I doubt that any of you have really had to live on the streets. Imagine what it would be like to try to be that brave for one day even, and night, in this town. We do it every day, every night. My minute and a half or two is about up. I do want to thank you for extending to us and considering us as a viable membership of your city. We are your citizens, and we deserve equal consideration, both under the law and just as humanitarians. Please consider that the humane approach is to ask, who is this person I'm really addressing? What's their frame of reference?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ethan Shankman will be followed by John Thomas.
Hello, Mayor and Council people. I addressed this same statement to the County Board of Supervisors this morning during public comment, and I'm just going to share it with you. To examine the controversy in press recently that surrounds artwork featuring Arabic numerals as being obscene, quote unquote, by Supervisor Assistant Bob Nelson, rather than what could otherwise be extrapolated as simply vulgar, could attach itself also as a felony, based on legal interpretations of what transpired in transaction to Olson's piece with the Arts Commission. Now, as measure of legal theory, the district attorney has the discretion not to enforce against various infringements within the county, depending on the caseload on her agenda. However, Dudley wouldn't have the discretion then to ignore the chronic abuse pattern syndrome leveraged in Arabic numeral signage to collect against the handicapped and disabled, elderly and decrepit, currently engaged flagrantly across the street from this building at the downtown parking garage. Aiding and abetting, affirmative consent, contributory negligence all encompass more than a matter of opinion, leading our succeeding generation bewildered even that Pedro Nava was reported to advocate secret meetings against the public from being open, fair, and transparent, which could also qualify fraction of treason. We need more from a leadership example if this controversy ends here, while rampant nonconformance and moral turpitude is being waged against our society. Please visit me on the web at churchofcalifornia.us. Thank you.
John Thomas, be followed by Phil Walker.
Madam Mayor, wonderful council members. There's a Native American Vietnam veteran who is dying from cancer. This veteran is the caretaker of a Desert Storm veteran who lives in the Garden Street apartments. The Desert Storm vet is in need of neck and knee surgery. The Vietnam vet parks his vehicle, his pickup truck, on Garden Street. In my opinion, the crime is that our city council has authorized police to ticket this Native American Vietnam veteran who's trying to help another one. This ticketing causes both vets' PTSD to flare up. I totally trust City Council will be able to fix this situation for me. Thanks.
Phil Walker will be followed by Hazel Johns.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. A 65-foot pine tree fell on a number of apartment units down in Costa Mesa yesterday. Now 4 units are red tagged. People are out essentially on the street. And I see it all over this town. Trees, especially the conifers, the needle trees, are flaring out, especially to the northwest quadrant. And a lot of people have not taken the time to properly remove them. The skirts on a lot of palms have been let go down to the sidewalk. Essentially, you're down to the ground. You got one big fire hazard, and you got to remember I think it was June 20th, 1990, the paint fire actually came down the riparian super flameways and leapt up into San Antonio Village and ignited. One other quick thing. I had a chance to tour some of the units, one unit in particular at the Green Valley LLC, adjacent to the Sycamore Punta Gorda Street Bridge. And the construction manager was very gracious, and these guys are working hard, trying to do the job. And I think they've taken a bad rap when, the city could have probably front-loaded some of the interference with this project, and it would have been good to get more involved with community development, even on the state-mandated projects that have state oversight. So possibly they can get some sort of landscape screening at the back. They've got 6.5 foot there that would go above dense but slow growing and not encroach on their units and give some spatial differentiation to the freeway. Thank you.
Hazel Johns will be followed by Lindsay Baker, then Richard Robinson, and Dr. Robert Johns will be the final speaker.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Hazel Johns, the Airport Director for the city, but I'm also this year's chair of the Charitable Giving Campaign. And I just wanted to let you know that our campaign for this year starts on October 5th and runs through October 30th. The theme is Building Better Futures Together. Last year we raised $48,000, and we're hoping for that or a little bit more this year. Education and literacy has been the hallmark of the United Way's programming. And with me today is Joshua Canada from United Way, and he'll speak to these programs. Thank you.
Thank you for having us for a minute. We actually just finished the Day of Caring this past Saturday. I know Helene was there, as well as some others, which was a wonderful opportunity. We had over 1,300 citizens, people from the community, out to volunteer at our schools and the city parks for other nonprofits. And Hazel mentioned we've really been focusing on partnerships with the school system, and our Fun in the Sun program in particular is deepening its relationship with the school. So the kids who otherwise would not have this enrichment opportunity in the summer have a continuous educational process. So they get it through the academic year and throughout the summer. And more bringing families who are working hard but struggling to provide for their families, bringing them in the process and letting them be empowered to speak into their kids' education. So again, thank you for hosting the campaign again. We look forward to a really great one this year, and thank you for your continued partnership.
Lindsay Baker.
Hello. I'm representing the League of Women Voters today. We are going to be holding forums for the upcoming election, and the dates will be September 28th at Harding School for the West Side, September 30th at Franklin School for the East Side, and October 1st at Washington School for the Mesa. These will all be from 7 to 9, and they will be simultaneously translated, and they will be posted on the League of Women Voters website. That is lwvsb.org. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Robinson.
Honorable Mayor, members, most African American blacks are American natives. In part, American native. Because God created me with a peculiar anointing, my life in Caesar's world, 74 years, has been rather difficult. But, ma'am, I was born, bred, educated, and religiously trained on the campus of the University of Michigan into Michelle Obama's family. Yada, yada, yada. But we are part Jewish, and until I arrived here 40 years ago, I had no awareness of my relationship with the Chumash. Also, the sense of pride I have in being South Carolina Cherokee, Mississippi Choctaw, and Arkansas Chickasaw gives me a sense of place in the best nation in the world. Because I'm a celibate, dope-free, smoke-free, alcohol-free, gambling-free Christian, I am not inclined to visit casinos, but the revenue generated not only helps to build hospitals and schools, it also generates personal wealth and riches that make the Chumash and other American natives capitalists. Thank you.
Robert Johns.
Good afternoon, council persons. I'm here to report out on the recent immigration, undocumented, and hearing that we just had here at county supervisors. And an ICE agent was making comments that they were only picking up people who had severe arrest type issues, and as the persons of Hispanic, and they said they were undocumented, making comments, as they made their comments, they were saying something totally different from what the ICE agent was saying. It was kind of like, from a psychological point, a cognitive distortion. That's this is amazing in this country, and so how I assessed the ICE distortion was that. He said, well, how could these people really know that we're coming after them? After all, we come in uniforms, but they're not marked. They're unmarked. And our cars are unmarked. And so how could they even know that we're coming after them? I could not believe an ICE agent would make a statement like that. And so when I commented about him, I said, you know something? You're an ICE agent, and you have a blind spot. This person has a blind spot because he doesn't understand that illegal or undocumented persons smell you. A bear in the woods smells a hunter because of the gunpowder. And this guy, and sure enough, this guy has such a blind spot he couldn't understand that. He's an ICE agent. A person like that should not be in that type of job because he just doesn't understand. He has a cognitive misunderstanding of life in general. That's from a psychological point of view, may I say. But I also...
Your time's up. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank
The
you.
fear that they had. Okay, talk to you later. Thank
Okay.
you.
That concludes public comment. Move on to the consent calendar. You have some items to read.
Item number 2, adoption of ordinance for lease agreements with Mercury Air Center, Santa Barbara Incorporated, and Signature Flight Support Corporation, recommending that council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving and authorizing the airport director to execute a lease amendment to lease agreement number 200846 as previously amended November 22nd, 2011 with Mercury Air Center, Santa Barbara Incorporated, doing business as Atlantic Aviation, a California corporation, amending the term and rent provisions to extend the expiration date to May 8, 2018, and provide for appropriate rental increases during the extended term. And B, adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving and authorizing the airport director to execute a lease amendment to restated lease amendment number 12,037.2 with Signature Flight Support Corporation, a California corporation, dated October 18, 2012, amending the term and rent provisions to extend the expiration date to May 8, 2018, and provide for appropriate rental increases during the extended term. Item number 3, adoption of ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending the existing 2014 through 2016 Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Santa Barbara and the Hourly Employees Bargaining Unit to comply with the Healthy Workplace, Healthy Family Act of 2014, recommending that Council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending the existing 2014 and 2016 Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Santa Barbara and the Hourly Employees Bargaining Unit to comply with the Healthy Workplace, Healthy Family Act of 2014. Item number 6, Management Recruitment, Relocation Assistance Benefits, recommending that Council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending the Management, Performance, and Compensation Plan to provide for relocation assistance benefits as a recruitment tool. Item number 7, Recodification of Ordinance Authorizing Design, Build, Operate Public Works Contracts, recommending that the Council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending the municipal code by adding section 4.52.165 pertaining to the public works contracts. Item number 8, Workers' compensation coverage for volunteers of the Police Reserve Corps, recommending that Council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara providing workers' compensation coverage for volunteers of the Police Reserve Corps pursuant to provisions of Section 3362.5 of the Labor Code and Section 9.114.140 of the Municipal Code.
Thank you. Without further objection, we'll waive further reading. We have some items to pull. Mr. White, did you want to pull an item?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Since I was absent from the meeting of September 8th, I will be abstaining from voting on those minutes.
Okay. Mr. Hart?
I'd like to pull items 4, 5, and 6.
All right. Why don't we just vote on item number 1? This is just the minutes for September 8th. Is there a motion for item 1?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Rouse, seconded by Hart. All in favor?
Aye.
And one abstention by Mr. White. Okay, so if we
Madam
can...
Mayor,
Yes.
excuse me, I'll be leaving the room for item 5.
You're leaving the room for item 5. Okay, we're going to do item 4 first. Item 4 is the equipment purchase and donation for Santa Barbara Police Department Fitness Facility. Mr. Hart?
Yes, I know that Sergeant McGrew is here from the Police Officers Association, as well as Eric Beecher, and I think they want to make a presentation of their donation to the city for this purpose.
Okay, then. I guess that's your cue.
Mr. Case, too.
And Mr. Case, come on up. You're in charge.
Wow.
You must be the one with the check.
So, how about a credit card? Would that work?
That'll work, too.
So the Police Foundation works hard, as you know, to raise funding for equipment and to support our local men and women of the police department. We're pleased to do that. We're particularly pleased to be able to contribute $20,532 towards purchase of equipment for the health facility or the gym, and we think that's a benefit to the officers, and want to particularly acknowledge Officer Greg Hans, who did a lot of work on securing that equipment at a reasonable price, and certainly want to thank Sergeant McGrew and Pam Jeremiah, who is also on the foundation board, and we're happy to continue to make these little presentations from time to time.
Well, great. Well, why don't we vote on it so that way I can officially take the check and hand it right over to our city administrator.
All right.
Is there a motion for item 4?
There is.
Okay. Moved by Hotchkiss, second by Rouse. All in favor? Aye. All right. Stay right there.
Well, the good news is we made this presentation. The bad news is we don't have a check.
You said you had your credit card, though.
But I'm glad that we had a unanimous vote.
Well, let's do a recount on that vote. I don't.
We will happily accept it when it's ready.
Is that
So
called
I would check the mail and...
You bounce a presentation, Madam Mayor?
No, that's all right. Why don't you come on up to the podium?
We are actually actually speed up the process. As you know, we're trying to get this done quickly. So we actually are purchasing the equipment directly and donating the equipment. So it will come in at about the same time that the items that the police department are ordering. So we actually wrote a check directly to the vendor. So that equipment, we'll probably have a grand opening, and hopefully we'll see you guys there. I believe it's going to be the third week of October.
Great.
So thank you for accepting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Very nice. Okay, so we ruled on item 4. Mr. Kalan's going to have to leave the room on item 5, so just hold on just a second. Did you read item 5? Yeah, could you read it? Thanks.
City attorney salary increase and future CPI adjustments.
Great. Mr. Hart, you wanted to comment on this?
Yeah, I think that City Attorney Kalan is doing a fantastic job. He's very well valued in the organization, and I do not object in any way to him getting a raise, but I don't support the 4.5% raise that's proposed by the council subcommittee and would prefer to vote on this item separately. I think that where the city's been doing a good job of holding the line on salaries at the 3% level for all levels, and I think this sets a bad precedent of going beyond that level of compensation.
Okay, I'll just, for context, for those listening and who care about this, just sort of mention this was a request to separate out the city attorney's compensation process away from what has been what has been practiced up to now, which is to match whatever the managers and supervisors receive and do something separate in the contract, as we can do under the charter. And since this is one of two positions the council does hire and approve. So there was, and it was noticed, a closed session on the item. There was a subcommittee on the item, so that's what's before us today. And just as another acknowledgement of the detail, one of the details in this is actually over time, in my opinion, less than what managers and supervisors will get on each year, because it has to do with a half of cost of living adjustment each year with a true up. If you want to look at the details, it's there. But I think the original idea behind this was to try to carve out the city attorney's compensation from when we do negotiations with another bargaining unit. So that's fine, and it's fine to vote against it. That's your prerogative. But I just wanted to put that in context of how we got to this point. So any other comments on this, or do we want to vote on this separately? So is there a motion on item 5?
Move item 5, Mayor. Second.
Moved by Rouse, seconded by Francisco. All in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed?
No.
One opposed, Mr. Hart. Okay. All right, and then item number 6, which is the management, recruitment, relocation assistant benefits, which was already read into the record. Mr. Hart?
Yes, this is a similar item. We obviously need to recruit the best people we can for management positions. We do pay very competitive salaries compared to agencies around the state. I think Santa Barbara as an organization is a high-quality job. I think that although it is difficult to recruit people, that it is not necessary to have this additional level of compensation for those positions. I'm concerned that having this policy in place will just lead to inflation of benefits for management, and I don't think it's appropriate in this environment, in this economy. So I will be voting against this item as well.
Okay. Anyone else on this item? Is there a motion for item 6?
So moved.
Moved by Francisco, second by Rouse. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed?
No.
No. So 6-1, Hart opposed. And then I don't see any other lights on for another item. So is there a motion for the balance of the consent calendar?
So moved.
Moved by Murillo, second by White. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. That's unanimous. Okay. On to item number 10.
Consent to Paseo Nuevo lease assignments and authorize execution of estoppel certificates, recommending that the successor agency board adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the successor agency to the redevelopment agency of the city of Santa Barbara, authorizing the executive director to acknowledge agreement and consent to release of liability of the Paseo Nuevo ground lease and related agreements, and to issue 2 estoppel certificates relating to the Paseo Nuevo shopping center in connection with a transfer of the Paseo Nuevo ground lease and related agreements from ING Direct Real Estate 3 LP and a Delaware Limited Partnership to Paseo Nuevo Owner LLC, a Delaware Limited Liability Company, all in a form acceptable to agency counsel.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the Successor Agency Board, I'm Sarah Connect, Assistant City Attorney. In conjunction with the transfer of the lessee's interest in the Paseo Nuevo leasehold, the new lessee, Paseo Nuevo owner, the former lessee, ING Direct Real Estate 3, and the leasehold mortgage lender, Wells Fargo Bank, have requested that the successor agency as lessor execute 2 estoppel certificates and consent to certain assignments of the lease and of the reciprocal easement agreement and certain other agreements, including the parking agreements. Under the estoppel, the agency must confirm certain facts under the lease and also that no current defaults exist under the lease, all of which staff has been able to confirm. The estoppel is essentially the same as what the redevelopment agency certified in 2002 when ING acquired the assets of the leasehold. ING is now assigning its interest in the lease to a wholly owned subsidiary, which is Paseo Nuevo owner. The assignments themselves do not require the successor agency's consent, but because ING is bringing in a new investor, it is seeking to release itself from liability under the lease, and that requires the successor agency's consent. The new tenant has assumed all of the obligations under the lease, including the parking agreements and the easement agreements. The Paseo Nuevo leases are 75-year terms with 49 years remaining. The successor agency assumed ownership of the Paseo Nuevo real property in 2012 when the redevelopment agency dissolved. The Department of Finance approved the successor agency's long-term property management plan for the property in May, and the plan calls for the transfer of the property to the city so that the city can carry out all the obligations of the lessor under the lease. That's scheduled to happen very soon. Mr. Americaner is here on behalf of the lessees if there are any further questions, and I am also. Thank you.
Any questions? Ms. Murillo?
I was just going to move
Go ahead.
Move the recommendation, Madam Mayor.
Moved by Murillo, second by White. Any other comments? No public comments, speaker slips? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. That was the easiest thing we've done with the successor agency with a lot of language. Okay. Item number 11.
Consideration of funding community choice aggregation feasibility study.
Mr. Dewey.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. I'm Jim Dewey, the Facilities and Energy Manager, and today I have with me Angie Hacker, who is the county's manager of the Empower SBC program. And today we're asking that council authorize staff to transmit $50,000 to the County of Santa Barbara for the purpose of funding the city's portion of a community choice aggregation feasibility study. A little bit on the background of that, City Council was approached by the Community Environmental Council in the county in spring 2015 to ask for funds to fund our portion of a feasibility study for a local community choice aggregation. This effort is also being referred to locally as Community Choice Energy, or CCE. CCE allows the California cities and counties to combine individual electrical users' energy to purchase electrical power for the community. During the budget presentations, council directed staff to return with more information related to the scope of the work and to identify the lead agency for a CCE feasibility study. Since then, the county has agreed to serve as the lead agency and has established a framework of community representation in the form of an advisory working group. And that working group would be responsible for the following tasks: to help develop the RFP for the feasibility study consultant, to select a qualified consultant from the proposals submitted, define the objectives for the study, develop a communications plan, review and comment on the feasibility study draft, and to receive ongoing updates regarding the progress. The advisory working group will provide updates to the Council Sustainability Committee and/or the City Council as needed, and establish the total cost of the established total cost of the feasibility study is $225,000 and is expected to include the following items: definition of the objectives and study areas, a pro forma analysis to assess the cost-benefit potential, risk analysis, emissions impacts, economic impacts including job creation, load data analysis and demand forecast, rate price modeling and analysis, power supply scenarios for the region CCE, and selective analysis reflecting changes as the market prices for conventional and renewable energy surcharges and fees, and energy policy changes. So we're here to answer any questions that you have about community choice energy. And
Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Does this have any implications rate-wise for ratepayers?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, yes, it does. The community choice energy will establish its own rates, and we're just talking about the electrical commodity here, which is kilowatt hours. So it's actually a measurement of energy. Southern California Edison will still provide all the costs related to the distribution or the delivery of energy.
So I'm just wondering, this is becoming an increasingly popular program statewide, is that correct?
Yes.
And so it stresses non-fossil fuel electricity, is that right?
It can stress whatever the group wishes it to stress. So, it's whatever the community really decides what is their priority. They can stress non-fossil fuel sources. They can work on trying to keep the price as low as possible, or a combination of the two.
Okay. So who establishes those criteria, those preferences? In other words, we've got various feelings in the community. Some people would like to have no fossil fuel electricity. Other people want to keep the rates as low as possible. How would we balance those two concerns?
Well, the first thing about the program is that it is an option. It is a choice that people can make. So people can opt out of community choice aggregation and stay with the current investor-owned utility, which is Southern California Edison. But basically, there'll be a lot of meetings that take in information, whatever the desires of the community are. That'll be weighed out and really determined by the board that will run the community choice energy.
Who comprises that board? Is that a combination of city and county?
Maybe Ms. Hacker can explain that.
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, council members. Typically, a community choice energy program could be done either in-house or through a JPA. In this case, with multiple jurisdictions, it's very likely
JPA being
a Joint Powers Authority.
Thank you.
Apologies. In which case, we would have a governance structure based on the representatives that are a member.
All right. So say that again. How would the city establish its members of this board?
So during the implementation phase, which would be the next phase after we actually study whether or not we want to proceed with community choice energy, we would come up with a governance structure that each of the jurisdictions that wish to participate in community choice would have input on, and we would ask for participation on the JPA. So there would be a vote that you would actually join a joint powers authority, in which case at that point that would have a governing structure moving forward.
So you said we. Who is we?
So the County of Santa Barbara is the lead agency on this effort.
Right.
But when we move to a joint powers agency, there will be voting rights established and a new governance structure established, which would include all the jurisdictions that participate.
So what future input would the city council have with this?
Councilmember Hotchkiss, in the initial phase of the feasibility study phase, where we're still evaluating whether or not we want to proceed, we'll have an advisory working group where the city council or the city would be able to appoint a representative to be on that committee and help provide input and feedback as we make progress.
Typically a staff member?
That's right.
Okay. When do you expect that this would come back, Mr. Dewey? Do we know?
Do you know what the timeline is on the feasibility study?
We have quite a few steps to get through until we can actually complete the feasibility study, but we are hoping to provide a feasibility study back for consideration by the end of the fiscal year, although there's quite a few opportunities for things to change in that timeline, but that's our effort.
And what other communities besides Santa Barbara has been asked or will join?
We have asked for each of the cities within the county whether or not they are interested in contributing or participating. We've also reached out to the County of Ventura and the County of San Luis Obispo to see if they have an interest in participating as well.
And what's the tally so far?
We have received formal confirmation from Ventura County that they are interested in participating and contributing.
How much are they contributing?
They are contributing $50,000.
Okay. Keep going.
We also have San Luis Obispo. The County of San Luis Obispo is considering an item coming up here in October. We haven't received final confirmation yet.
How much would they be asked for?
$50,000.
Okay, keep going, if you would. Sorry, you can just go on if you want.
No problem.
That's all right.
City of Carpinteria recently confirmed contribution of $7,500. Those are the confirmed contributions to date.
Anybody turned it down so far?
We have an interest in participating from the City of Goleta, but not a appropriation.
Okay, so they get the results but don't pay anything for it? Is that the idea?
In this phase, that is correct.
The next phase, would they have to pay? In other words, if somebody doesn't pay now, would they pay later? I'm just kind of seeing how this is structured.
Those are the items we're discussing today. I think that's something we'd like to talk about more in the advisory committee. We might get a little ahead of ourselves by answering today, but I think that that's probably a likely conclusion in the next phase.
So I'm just wondering if we can get something for free here, Mr. Dewey. Is this possible?
Well, I think that funds have already been appropriated for this, as far as the city getting something for free.
Well, we haven't voted the funds yet, but...
I think that, we have also talked about taking a leading effort, and council, I think back in 2008, expressed interest in combining, if we were able to combine with Ventura County, that we would agree to a $100,000 feasibility study. And meaning that, 50% of that would come from us, 50% would come from Ventura County. So, is it possible for us to get something for free? I think that we would need to participate in this. I don't think there's any way around it.
Oh, I don't mean to sound like a cheapskate, but I'm supposed to be watching for taxpayer money, so that's what I'm trying to do here. So, in essence, we're sort of saying, yeah, we could get the results, but we might not have to pay. I don't want to misphrase this. So Mr. Casey's going to correct me now.
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Hotchkiss, I wouldn't recommend taking that approach. I think if council's interested in participating in the study, we should be a financial partner as well. I think that's best for relationships going forward, especially if we look to joining some sort of joint powers agreement going forward. I think there are different dynamics going on between the county and the city of Goleta that I don't think we should use that as a model to follow.
Can you explain when you say different dynamics?
I don't want to get in speaking on anyone's behalf. City of Goleta has a revenue neutrality agreement with the county that came about as part of their incorporation, and I think there's some ill feelings between the two jurisdictions about it.
Believe me, we all know about that one.
And that's coloring some of their thought process on things, and I don't think we have that dynamic here. And I think if we want to participate in the study, I think we should fully participate and have a seat at the table and have our financial share be
Thank you, Mr. Dewey.
as well.
Did you have something you were going to add?
No, I have nothing more.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Dewey, when in the wording on the resolution or the proposal, it talks about the cost is estimated to be, and that we expect to include the following. So my question would be, I know we've earmarked $50,000 from the water fund. Is that a not to exceed number, or is there a chance that this study is going to get to a certain point and go, we're going to need to go further. We've got to come back to all the agencies for more money. Is there been any talk about that?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, the $50,000 is what the county refers to as phase one, which is the feasibility study. And the total costs also reflect not only hiring a consultant, but also the county staff time. And so as far as I understand it, there will not be another ask for money concerning phase one or the feasibility study.
So the product we're looking for here is going to be completed with the monies we're going to invest, and you have confidence in that?
Yes, yeah. And then we'll be able to come back and say, is this feasible, is it not? This is what this deal looks like, and have a lot more information from there. There'll be another decision that needs to be made to move forward.
In a broad definition of the effort we're going to make here today, is what we're doing basically creating another agency in order to bargain for and secure energy sources? I mean, currently, like you said, it's a privately held utility that goes forth and makes deals for our electricity, our energy, and whatnot. Are we making a new agency? And if so, and I realize it's part of the study, but it seems like we're adding this extra layer of bureaucracy in order to do what's basically being done now in another form. Would part of the study be, for example, partnering with Edison to enhance what they do or request what they do to go and broker with renewable resources like wind, like solar, or because this sounds like we're doing a completely separate thing. And the reason I'm going there is that right now we're asking Edison, we're trying to demand from Edison as much as we're able to invest a lot of money in our local infrastructure that is needed. And I realize what their job is to transfer power around. But by the same token there's got to be a revenue component to that as well. So at any point, are we hamstringing the ability of Edison to go forward and give us the infrastructure we're asking for in a big picture analysis?
On the big picture analysis, I would say to that, no, we are not keeping Edison from replacing all of their infrastructure. Edison will still be responsible for the distribution and the delivery of power, and will have a rate structure associated that can handle the replacement of capital infrastructure. Back when deregulation happened in California, Southern California, Edison was required to divest themselves of all of their generating assets. So most of the generation in California is owned by other parties. And, when we had direct access and the market was open, virtually anyone that was a power buyer, power purchase buyer could go out and procure energy on the wholesale market. Well, that's no longer available since, direct access ended. So community choice aggregation allows that to open that market back up to another agency, as you say. It will be another agency. And then the question is, can the commodity be packaged in a way that is more beneficial for the community than the way Edison is doing it now? That's something that we need to decide and figure out. I mean, if we can do it, then there's definitely an advantage in having a community choice energy, being able to package the right kind of energy, more renewables maybe, or be able to save in the energy commodity, and bring the price down. So that would be an advantage to the community.
But as you described before, it's not an all in or all out. There's an option, but there must be a threshold of participation where it's going to make sense or it's not going to make sense.
Yes. It'll be an opt-out program. So if it's adopted, everyone will automatically be opted into that, and there'll be a lot of communication about that, so people are very aware of what's going on, and then they can opt out and become just solely a Southern California Edison customer again, if they so choose. But yeah, there is definitely a critical mass involved with that.
Okay, I'm starting to get my arms around it. I'm still a little confused about how the big picture works and where all the revenue comes from. But you've done a good job, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hacker. Do you have anything you wanted to add to Mr. Rouse's question?
Councilmember Rouse, you asked about what the role of this phase really was and what we'll end up with at the end. So this phase is really about evaluating the feasibility and the viability of a community choice energy program. You and all the other jurisdictions that would like to participate will have an opportunity after that to decide if you'd like to go or not to go forward with implementation. So you're not today voting to implement a new public agency.
Thank you.
Mr. Francisco, and then we'll go to public comment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Dewey, you mentioned that it hasn't been decided what the goals of this organization would be. But let's suppose the feasibility study is done. Everybody says, "Oh, that's wonderful. Let's go forward and do a JPA." And now we've created this organization with a governing structure and staff and everything else. Is that the point at which, once that governing structure is created for the JPA, that it would be decided what the goals would be?
Councilmember Francisco, I'll take a shot at this, but I'll allow also Ms. Hacker to join in on this. That it should be very clearly established from the community and everyone else that's going to be involved in this what the goals are going to be before the JPA goes ahead and moves towards establishing or perfecting those goals.
So are you suggesting then that after the feasibility study is done and before a JPA is formed, that all of the participants would say, this is what we want, and then we'd figure out what the votes were and go from there?
I'm not exactly sure as far as the timing where the JPA is established and what it needs to go further as far as the rest of Phase 2 is concerned. But the way I would envision it is that, yes, that these decisions would not be made, solely by a board, but it would be based on the community input.
But I mean, typically the way we determine community input on these things is by how the city council votes or the board of supervisors votes or whatever, correct? I mean, are you envisioning some kind of referendum or something?
I would expect that that elected officials would weigh in the process, definitely. And how this is all going to work out, I'm not exactly sure in our case. But I would say this is that I think that that these decisions should not be made solely by JPA, that it needs to be made by the community, represented by elected officials, or whatever the mechanism is before ideally before a JPA really takes charge of that.
Okay. Thank you.
And would you like to comment on that?
Council members, I think it's important to note that the feasibility phase allows us to look at various scenarios and look at pricing modeling based on various factors, which could mean different shares of renewables that are going to be included in the mix. So I think that will give us an opportunity to see what is the most viable and what sort of share of renewables would be able to offer. The next phase is the implementation phase. That's where we can design a business plan associated with how we want to move forward on wholesale prices and wholesale purchases of electricity. And again, we mentioned the JPA. The JPA would definitely be part of the decision-making process on behalf of its jurisdictions.
Mr. Hart, and then Mr. Hotchkiss.
Well, I guess just to make this more clear, this isn't happening in a vacuum. This is clearly intended to create choice for consumers to choose an option that provides a more renewable range of energy sources for them as a consumer. Today, we don't have a choice. We get the energy that Edison arranges for as controlled by state legislation. So the idea here is to create a new option for consumers to choose to have this cleaner power available to them. The opt-in portion means that you would by default make that choice, or that choice would be made for you. But if you didn't like that choice for any reason, whether it was because of cost or ideology or whatever, you can choose to opt out. So, to Councilmember Francisco's question about what don't we need to have goals before we have a governance structure, we do have a goal. The goal is to provide choice of green power for consumers, and that's the intent of this feasibility study, is to examine the marketplace for that, look at the experience in other communities around the state, and whether that will work in our specific region. And I assume that what you're doing is you're looking in Ventura County, and you're looking in San Luis Obispo County, and if San Luis Obispo County agrees to financially contribute, the entire region might be studied as a critical mass entity. And you will probably also look at subsets of that, given that it may not be feasible for them. And I would hope that you would look down to the granular level to include just even the city of Santa Barbara as a separate entity, because I'm concerned. I think this is a really valuable thing. I think that residents of the community want to do this. But I think there's a tension between including everybody and having that the most effective critical mass, but it taking a very long time to get there. So that I would just urge that we deliver something as quickly as possible.
Do you have a question in there?
There was a clarification of Councilmember Francisco's question.
Okay, because we do
Clarification of my question.
I understand, and I didn't have my microphone on until Councilmember Francisco asked a question that I don't think was resolved because Councilmember Francisco clicked on his microphone as well. So I just wanted to add that clarification as part of a quasi-question.
Quasi-question. Okay. Okay. Mr. Hotchkiss, do you have a question? And then we'll go to public comment.
I actually have a question here. Is there going to be a cost to opting out?
Councilmember Hotchkiss, that hasn't been determined yet, but it would make, looking at these models, Southern California Edison charges cost under a fee called a cost responsibility surcharge to opt out. And if you're making long-term purchases on the behalf of customers, there would need to be some mechanism to recover those costs. In other words, if you make all these long-term purchases, you can't have people bailing out on it. So there would need to be some mechanism in order to keep, some commitment as far as the participants.
Well, we could really stack the deck here. If it cost a whole lot to opt out, then sort of why do we spend the money to even do the study? We could just jam it down people's throats. That's what would happen. That's why I'm asking, is there a cost or will there be a cost to opt out? Because in a sense, it's not a level playing field if it's really expensive to opt out.
Councilmember Hotchkiss, it hasn't been an issue so far with any of the existing CCAs. And, the feasibility study would determine what that fee would be. Everyone would know what that is up front. It would be part of what determines the feasibility of the CCE. So, I guess your question is that going to be such a big factor that should we even move forward with
it?
Yeah,
it is.
It has not been in any active CCA so far. So I don't see that as a major issue. But there would definitely need to be some commitment if you're going to participate in a CCA. That only makes financial sense.
Okay, so it would be no. I'm just wondering if the cost for opting in or opting out. This is raises too many questions for me. Okay, thank you very much, Ms.
I think that's the point of the feasibility study, is to answer those questions. But Jefferson Litton, if you want to come on up.
Madam Mayor and fellow council members, Jefferson Litton, the Community Environmental Council. The Community Environmental Council strongly supports moving forward with transmitting the $50,000 that were appropriated back in June. Quite simply, community choice offers benefits that we've seen proven in Marin, Sonoma, and Lancaster. And what these benefits are cleaner energy, cheaper electricity rates, competition and choice, local control and accountability, and the opportunities for new local renewable energy development. Just to give you a few figures about those cheaper rates, even with those additional costs for opting out from PG&E, and Marin, their customers are saving, in 2014, $6 million a year. And in 2015, those customers, ratepayers, are saving $10 million a year. Sonoma Clean Power, in their first year, their ratepayers saved $13.6 million. So clearly delivering on cheaper electricity. Those savings extend to municipal customers as well. The town of Windsor enjoyed savings of $48,000 by participating in Marin Clean Energy, and the city of Richmond saved $107,000 by participating in Marin Clean Energy. Contributing to this study gives the city the opportunity to sit on that advisory board and shape what that feasibility study would look like and the questions that you could see answered with the feasibility study. It also cements the city of Santa Barbara in a position of leadership. The city of Santa Barbara has led on environmental issues, led the region, led the state, and led the nation. CEC would argue that community choice is the biggest step towards environmental leadership that the city of Santa Barbara could take. Thanks.
Mr. Dewey, thank you.
Yep.
Did you have a question for Mr. Litton? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Litton, and I've just heard about this anecdote. Does UCSB have its own program for CAC?
They do not have a program right now. They're discussing, from what I hear, they're discussing a direct access contract, but right now they're just an Edison customer.
Oh, it's different than what you're talking about? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. So, Mr. Dewey, you get to be the lucky one that sits on this committee, the subcommittee or advisory committee or whatever. What are we calling it? The working group, the advisory working group, or who gets to do that on our behalf? Or Mr. Casey, is that you?
No. Madam Mayor, my idea would be Mr. Dewey and also Ms. Antill out of my office. So we have someone out of my office, but also Mr. Dewey with his expertise.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure who the players were who can talk the tech necessary and ask the questions well. And I think you have a number of questions that you already have listed here that you want to make sure they're answered. And I think a lot of they're good questions, and I think that's the point of the feasibility study. And if we find that too many people want to opt out, then it won't be feasible. So that's what we're trying to figure out and see what works. Ms. Murillo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to see Santa Barbara lead the way on this kind of effort, and I think the $50,000 would be a great investment. I move the staff recommendation to authorize the transmittal of the $50,000 into the program.
Second.
Moved by Mario and second by Hart. Mr. Hart, did you have anything else?
I just wanted to make sure, I guess I should ask this question when we were doing questions. Will there be a subset that includes the City of Santa Barbara as a standalone entity in the feasibility study?
Council members, I actually don't have direction on that at the moment. I'd have to go back and check with my superiors on that matter. I do think there are opportunities to study different scenarios. I'm not sure how granular yet we'd like to get.
Well, I guess that's direction that I would be supportive of. I just want to know that we have our own independent option, because I am concerned that it's great to be doing this collectively. I understand the economy of scale of that, but there, in my mind, is a tension between speed and effectiveness and getting something done, and then adding people as it becomes more successful down the road. I think that's been the experience in some of the other locations around the state, is to get something going and then by its track record, attract other participants, as opposed to working through a very, very long, potentially contentious collaborative government process that would get consensus from all these different local agencies, and the fact that there are two different private utility companies in this county of Santa Barbara. That adds a complexity in our area that makes this more difficult with the model that you're approaching on. So that's my addition to the conversation.
Mr. Francisco?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was glad to see last week that the California legislature rejected SB 350. They rejected the opportunity to once again take California on the path of environmental leadership. Environmental leadership, unfortunately, comes with a huge price tag. Californians pay the highest energy prices in the country. And I know Governor Brown was at the Vatican a couple months ago talking about what a wonderful thing it was to be a moral leader in this field. But what I would like to see is for Californians to have cheap, abundant energy. And I know that the environmental community is opposed to coal, oil, natural gas, nuclear, and hydro, the only reliable sources of energy we have, and that the environmental community favors solar and wind, which have their place, but not in the reliable provision of power and on an industrial scale. So I'm sure, if these things have succeeded in saving people money elsewhere, there must be subsidies that are making that possible, because renewable energy is not cheap. And I'm sure we have the majority votes on this council to appropriate this money to this purpose. I personally don't see a value in adding another layer of bureaucracy to our electrical power procurement. Thank you.
Okay, well, good luck. You have a lot of people to work with, and I would just echo that what would be interesting to see in this feasibility study is if there are other components, such as San Luis Obispo County and Ventura County, that end up not wanting to be a part of it, that we can still move forward and figure out what the right combination of entities are to make something workable. Because it seems to me there are examples elsewhere in the state where it's not only a push towards renewable energy sources, which our utilities have to have certain mandates by certain dates anyway, that it's actually a competition's good, and we're seeing that there's savings involved as well. So you can have good, cheap energy from multiple sources if you have the structure to make it happen. And I think that's what we're looking at here to see what's possible in our own neck of the woods. And we have some great models to look at other places in the state. So I look forward to seeing the study as it comes back, and I want to thank Mr. Dewey for all your work in everything that you do in this city to keep us energy efficient. But this is going to be, I know, a challenge working with a larger group of people, but you have the mindset for sure and the expertise to ask those tough questions. So thank you. And thank you, Ms. Hacker, for being here today. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
No.
So that is 5-2, opposed by Hotchkiss and Francisco. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 12.
Potential acquisition of vacant land, APNs 047-010-064, 047-010-065, and 047-061-026 along Lower Arroyo Burrow, former Veronica Meadows development site.
Mr. Cameron Benson. Mr. Cameron Benson. Right, Benson. Yes, hello, Mr. Creeks Manager.
Good
Hello.
afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Cameron Benson. I'm the Creeks Manager for the city, and we are here today to talk about the potential acquisition of a 14 3/4 acre parcel in Lower Arroyo Borough. The parcel is formerly the site of Veronica Meadows subdivision and development. This is going to be a two-part presentation. Back in April, Alex Size from the Trust for Public Land came down to give you a status report about the Trust for Public Land's efforts to purchase this property. He's here again today, and he's going to give the first part of the presentation, and then I'm going to follow him with some information about how this relates to the city and also funding for the request you're going to hear. So with that, I'll turn it over to Alex Size from the Trust for Public Land.
Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Alex Size, Project Manager with the Trust for Public Land. The item before you today is the proposed acquisition of 14.8 acres of land at the terminus of Allen Road, commonly referred to as Veronica Meadows. The Trust for Public Land has been working on acquiring and protecting this site for over 2 years. We do have the property under contract, as I spoke to you all a number of months ago. Since that time, we've raised about $1.3 million in public funding to acquire the site. That funding came from 3 separate sources, 2 state sources and 1 county source. The 2 state sources are from the State Coastal Conservancy as well as the Natural Resources, the EEMP program with the state. And those funds were originally appropriated by the legislature to protect open spaces just like the Veronica Meadows site, as you see here on the screen. The other funding from the county is the Coastal Resources Enhancement Fund, the CREF funds. We received the largest CREF fund grant award this year, and so that combines with the other state sources of funding to $1.3 million, which will go directly towards the acquisition of the site. We've also had the appraisal approved by the Department of General Services. We contracted with Jim Hammock, local appraiser, to appraise the site. The Department of General Services has to review all appraisals that when there's state funding involved, and they approved the appraisal a couple months ago. So with that, we are trying to locate the balance of the funds needed to acquire the site. We have the property under contract for $4 million, and so the request of you today is the appropriation of $2.7 million coming from the Measure B and the Creeks funds, and to also accept title from the Trust for Public Land in the near future. We have a little bit more work to do, but certainly we would like your support on this item so we can move towards closing. So happy to answer any questions that you may have, and I'll end my presentation with that.
I first want to thank you for your tenacity in getting the other funds available to this project.
Thank you
that was
so
a lot
much.
of work. Any questions? Okay. Yes, Ms. Murillo.
I understand that there's a very small sum. I'm sorry, maybe you mentioned it and it didn't absorb. Left to raise in $25,000 or?
Yeah, the Trust for Public Land does have a small capital campaign. We're trying to raise $25,000 to kind of offset some of the costs that we've incurred. As I mentioned earlier, we've been working on this for about 2 years now. We paid for appraisals and other studies. Obviously, my time, my attorney's time. We incur a substantial amount of costs with these types of transactions. So we are having a separate capital campaign to kind of pay for some of those costs that we have incurred to date. Those funds will not go towards the acquisition of the property.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a number of public comment speaker slips. I don't have any other questions for you, Mr. Size, at this
Thank you
point.
so much.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I've got a little more information
sure.
to add, if that's okay. First of all, I think the council members are familiar with this property, but I wanted to just make sure to orient you to the property. That larger slide we were looking at, and the 14 3/4 acres is approximately this location here. And just to orient you, this is Las Positas Road here, the Douglas Family Preserve, Hendry's Beach, Elings Park is over here. And I just wanted to, from the city and from the Creeks Division perspective, just emphasize what a significant opportunity this is for creek restoration, water quality improvement within the city and on the lower Arroyo Burro watershed. It's a very unique property. There just aren't really any large properties on this scale that offer this kind of opportunity left within the city limits. Also important is that this property is connected to a lot of other open space properties that are in public ownership. Directly adjacent to the property that we're talking about today, the city has a 6-acre open space park parcel. So we'll have, combining those together, we have about 21 acres right there. Arroyo Burro runs right down almost along the property line between those two parcels. As I mentioned, you have Elings Park over here, and then the Elings Park Foundation owns this large parcel here. The Creeks Division purchased this 1.5-acre parcel right at the corner of Las Positas and Cliff Drive a few years ago to use for a restoration project. We have the Douglas Family Preserve property here, and the Watershed Resource Center and the Arroyo Burro Beach County Park right here. And then in addition to that, when Caltrans relinquished Las Positas Road to the city, that also included the right-of-way on either side of the road, which basically creates a public parcel all along the side of the creek there. And then obviously this is just upstream from a large creek restoration project the Creeks Division did back in 2006 with the Arroyo Burro estuary restoration and the daylighting of Mesa Creek all along here. That connectivity really dramatically increases the value of the wildlife habitat and also increases our ability to see more benefits with regard to water quality. We just have less pollutants getting into the creek and more area and more opportunity to improve the water quality.
Mr. Hotchkiss,
if I could you go back to that slide?
Sure.
Is north to the right?
North, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so who owns the property west of these parcels, that large vacant area? Is that school district property there? Or?
No, this is private property. A large portion of this belongs to this home on the hills, on top of the hill here. That's a property about that size, and then there's an 11-acre parcel privately owned, also that's right up here on this hillside.
Are those developable? Do we know? Developable, I guess is the right way of saying it.
Well, clearly this property's been developed. I mean, it's a single parcel. I think it's about 40 acres right now, and I don't know what the potential development would be.
To ask you, but
would be for this property. This is actually in the county, so the city annexed this parcel around here, but these are in the county.
And that's pretty vertical there too, isn't it?
Very steep, and there are known and anticipated landslide potential in that hillside. There's some geologic issues there.
Thank you.
With regard to the budget, as Alex mentioned, the Trust for Public Land was applied for and was successful with 3 grants totaling $1.3 million. The Trust for Public Land is here today to request an appropriation of $2.7 million from the Measure B Reserve Fund. We do have that funding available in the Measure B Reserve. And with regard to grant funding, I also want to point out the Trust for Public Land is expert at researching and applying for grants. They do an excellent job, very, very thorough. But at the council's based on suggestions from the last time we were at council, we really wanted us to go out and beat the bushes. I can tell you we've looked through everything, and we left no stone unturned. And this is it. This is what was out there. As Mr. Size mentioned, we did get some of the highest grant totals of any projects we were competing with throughout the state. But there are a lot of grant programs that are out there for restoration of the property. They just weren't available for acquisition. So we do have potential to continue to seek grant funding as we go forward with any kind of creek restoration or water quality improvement project there. And we would definitely be looking for those things. As I mentioned, we do have the funding available in the Measure B reserve now. Taking this money out would take us below our target reserve balance for a period of time. We do have some operating surplus built into our current year, fiscal year 16 budget, and in our fiscal year 17 budget. And assuming those come out as planned, we will have some money going back into our reserve, and we'll be close to our target reserve by the end of FY17. And then lastly, I just want to say on August 19th, the Parks and Recreation Commission and the Creeks Advisory Committee held a joint meeting at the site, and the commission and the committee recommended to council to appropriate the funds necessary for the acquisition and to accept the property from the Trust for Public Land after the transaction closes. And with that, I'll conclude and be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. I think we have public comment, so why don't we go right to that? So we'll start with Lindsay Baker, to be followed by Lee Moldaver. You have 2 minutes there.
Madam Mayor, City Council, again, I'm representing the League of Women Voters of Santa Barbara. On April 4th, the League submitted a letter to you and made a statement to the Council. The Santa Barbara League of Women Voters has long been concerned about the future of the lower Arroyo Burro Creek natural area, and we welcome the possibility that the Trust for Public Land might acquire that property. That area is a natural watershed for this important creek and needs protection for that reason. It also provides an excellent corridor for wildlife in the city. The League hopes that the city will be able to cooperate with the Trust in planning for the protection of this creek and the important Arroyo Burro Beach Park below it. The present intensive use of that beach requires that the creek that feeds into it have proper control of development upstream. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee Moldaver will be followed by Leslie Wiscombe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the Council. I'm Lee Moldaver, the Vice Chair of your Creeks Advisory Committee. We've been very well served over the years with Council liaisons like Kathy Murillo and Greg Hartnow, Frank Hotchkiss, and before Frank, Michael Self. And I think all our liaisons know that this has been a potential project and a high priority for many years. There are pollution and erosion and water quality issues in this part of the creek that would make it an ideal acquisition, especially since we have a willing seller and it's going at a fair market price by appraisal. This is something that the Creeks Committee has long had in mind when we had our reserve fund. And some of you may remember, some of you may have forgotten. This is also an opportunity to realize more of the vision for an integrated Arroyo Burro Creek ecosystem that the Wendy P. McClough Foundation funded a very extensive study, of which I think you still have somewhere in your office the report, trying to track land use and the watershed and pollution all the way from the foothills down to the ocean. And the original vision of Measure B is to integrate all that knowledge in a more effective land use and management to reduce that pollution and make all our creeks, watersheds, and beaches more attractive. This will be a huge step in that direction, and having a partner like the Trust for Public Lands only assures confidence. So our committee very, very strongly supports the recommendation, and we hope you can endorse it. Thank you.
Leslie Wiscombe, we followed by Daniel McCarter.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of City Council. I'm Leslie Wiscombe with the Parks and Recreation Commission. As Mr. Benson mentioned, at our joint meeting with the Creeks Advisory Committee on August 19th, the Commission voted unanimously to recommend the transfer of funds from the Creeks Fund reserves for the purchase of the Veronica Meadows property by the city for future restoration and open space purposes. The Commission expresses gratitude to the Trust for Public Land, the Friends of Arroyo Burro Creek, and the Stone Creek Homeowners Association for carrying the torch on this very important land acquisition for community benefit. As well, we commend the Parks and Recreation staff who have worked very hard with these organizations to get to this day. This is a unique opportunity, as you all know, to acquire a missing link along the Arroyo Burro Creek that will go a long way to support continuance of the great restoration work that's already been completed along the creek and to support connectivity with existing public open space. So we hope you'll all agree and support the funding and acquisition. Thank you very much.
Daniel McCarter, be followed by Carla Frisk.
Madam Mayor, City Council, I'm Dan McCarter with Friends of Arroyo Burro. I attended the candidates forum last night at the Holy Cross Parish Hall on the Mesa. The question was asked to the candidates if there was that were sitting there where they if they were sitting where you are today. Excuse me. The question was asked if the candidates, if they were sitting where you are today, would they vote for Measure B funds to acquire the Veronica Meadows? It seemed an easy decision as they agreed it would be the right thing to do for the community. As you know, these opportunities are far and few. Today, it is an easy decision for you to make, but we know we have come a long way to get here. It is time to close the chapter on this controversial property and move on. Alex Size and Trust for Public Lands have done an incredible job in making the Veronica Meadows passive open space possible. As for the community part, we have raised $6,700 towards our $25,000 goal. All contributions are welcome. Simply put in your browser, help protect Veronica Meadows, and contribute. Thank you.
Carla Frisk will be followed by Danielle DeSmith.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. My name is Carla Frisk, and I'm just speaking as an individual today. Like many of the people that have spoken already, I feel like I have long hoped that this property would someday be able to be permanently protected and placed in public ownership. And I think I've had conversations with Councilmember White and many of you over the years about this goal. As a former employee of the Trust for Public Land, I had the privilege of being able to launch this acquisition effort with Alex Size, who's at the Trust for Public Land and has been the project manager on this. And it's particularly very important for me today, very exciting for me today to be here on this brink of success and to thank the council for its support and for its consideration of this most generous amount of money to make this happen. And then I'd just like to also acknowledge both Alex Size and Cameron Benson for their nose to the grindstone effort to make this project, to bring this project today. As someone who has been there before on many projects with the Trust for Public Land and now with the Land Trust for Santa Barbara County, I know how much work goes into these projects, and it is substantial. All the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, all the things that go wrong that you never hear about because we're here, right? And so I just wanted to say that and encourage you to support this effort.
Danielle DeSmith will be followed by Alice San Andres Calleja.
Thank you, Mayor Schneider and Council. I'm here. I'm glad that you're happy to hear on this. This is as chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee to the Creeks and Water Quality Improvement Division for the city. I won't repeat what my vice chair, Mr. Moldaver, said, but I will share with you that the committee has repeatedly commended Mr. Benson for his hard work in securing grants that allow this reserve to be in place to fund this project. So while Mr. Benson commended Mr. Size and his effort and outreach in getting grants, our committee routinely thanks Mr. Benson for the work that he does for our committee, and based on his track record, have no doubt that he will work hard to secure grants once this project is approved, should you approve it, to fund water quality improvement projects at the site. Thank you.
Alice San Andres Calleja will be followed by Laura Nana and then Kellum DeForest.
I'm Alice San Andres Calleja, community organizer, publisher, editor, gardener, janitor, and patrol of the Mesa. I'm here just to say that when it's grassroots-led effort, you know that it is a good vision because it's the people themselves who decide on it. And good visions attract good people, the trust, public land. Dan Carter's group, the commission. So, again, most of the time when I do speak here, when you have a vision and you work for it, you should never worry about funds. They will come. Serious. You attract all the good forces in the universe. So please say yes. Thank you.
Laura Nana.
Hello. I have lived in the end of Allen Road for over 40 years, and I have heard quite a number of proposals for the use of this property. And I think this is the very best one I've ever heard. And I'm really very excited about it and can't wait for it to happen. And so thank you for your consideration of this. And I also want to thank all my neighbors and all the entities that have worked so hard on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Kellen DeForest and then Misty Zyksoff.
Good afternoon. This parcel played an important role in the history of Santa Barbara. Nobody has talked about the history yet. From 1890 to 1928, the mineral water from Veronica Springs, which the springs are sealed up in there and probably could be, if we get some rain, resurrected. But the water from these springs was bottled and marketed worldwide. The label prominently displayed a picture of the mission and the name of Santa Barbara. They are those that contend that Veronica Springs water put Santa Barbara on the map. This contention might be overblown, but extracting and marketing of Veronica Medical Springs water played an important role in the development of Santa Barbara. What existed on this site was a large barn-like structure where the water from the springs was piped into tanks and was transported first into casks and shipped to San Francisco for bottling. In 1913, because of the popularity of the water, a bottling plant was built on the corner of Montecito and Salsapoete streets. And as the Food and Drug Administration didn't like these kind of mineral waters, the water company folded, and the vacant land now exists. There was a gazebo structure which housed a fountain where visitors could sample the water. When the site, with the city's help, finally becomes an open space, I hope some recognition of the site's importance can be installed, such as a replica of the gazebo. Thank you.
Thank you. Missy Zyksoff and then Mark Chatillo.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and council members, honorable also. I'm Missy McSweeney Zyksoff, and one of the aforementioned candidates at the forum last night who totally agreed with this proposal. I urge you to accept this. This is a wonderful, beautiful opportunity, and as we know, we don't have that many opportunities to benefit open space for our residents and tourists to breathe and to play and to restore creeks and to restore quality of water, and for the creatures, the wildlife. This is just an amazing idea. Cost-benefit analysis done by me. $2.7 million is a steal, and I think everybody would be very happy if you do this.
Mark Chatillo will be followed by Judy Haver-Harris, then Eddie Harris, James Hawkins, and Hillary Hauser.
Madam Mayor, members of council, I'm Mark Chatillo on my own behalf here today to urge you to accept staff's recommendation and to dedicate this funds to this important project. It's been a long time coming. Many people have worked on this over the years, and I think you probably couldn't find a finer use of Measure B's funds. I'm going to mention a couple of things that may not have already been mentioned. I want to acknowledge the hard work of staff, TPL, and all the folks that have been engaged on this, and indeed the work by many of you members of council as we've sought to secure the preservation of this property. First of all, open space is no longer being produced. We need to preserve what we have. And as our community grows and densifies in order to make more efficient use of our urban land areas, we need to have a commensurate preservation of open space areas. So there needs to be both, with the densification, the preservation of additional open space. And obviously, these areas here are very important to the residents of the city, and I think it's quite an appropriate decision. I would encourage your council to continue to direct staff to proceed on trying to identify other areas that can be preserved. And secondly, as we learned with the Wilcox, I don't think it's going to be an issue here, but it's important that the public has confidence that lands are going to be preserved in perpetuity. And that's a condition of many of the grants that I think have accompanied this, and I hope that it'll be an action by the council to direct your council to ensure that there will be the appropriate legal encumbrances on the parcels, so that there will not be a temptation in the future that there might be some development scheme or something like that. These lands are clearly going to be of the greatest value as open space for the public. They represent really the best part of our community. And as you stand here with the ability to expand our open space portfolio, I think that we should all be very proud. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy Haver-Harris.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. I appreciate being here on such a great occasion. Just to correct one little thing I've heard about the history, it was from 1542 through our present 2015 that Veronica Springs Meadows remains a piece of land, a little pocket of rural Santa Barbara, a testament to the earlier time in a legendary spring. We are grateful for many years of hardworking environmentalists, professionals, and locally concerned citizens, and now we look to you, the City Council, for protecting this unique parkland. Thank you very much for your support.
Eddie Harris.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Eddie Harris. I'm president of Santa Barbara Urban Creeks Council. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we've advocated for sound stewardship of creeks and natural resources for over 25 years on the South Coast. And we've been a voice for over 3,000 members and families who have concerns about disappearing water resources and open space. We agree with staff and with Trust for Public Lands and with City Parks and the Creeks Division and all the other people that have spoken today that this acquisition is highly desirable and will be a great asset for the community. It's been a long road for us to get to this point, and I won't go into a lot of the details on that. We've been aware for many years of the potential that exists on this site. This is the very last coastal open space remaining in the city. And the park will provide benefits for neighbors, visitors, the whole community, as well as for wildlife. It's fortunate that Measure B money is available for this purchase and that the very capable Creeks Division can help to manage and provide stewardship for the property. And just in closing, I want to just so that you know some indication of the support for this project on Earth Day. This past Earth Day, over 50 people came to our booth and indicated their support by signing up to help as volunteers for the restoration effort to reestablish native plants on the site. And Urban Creeks Council will be there also to work with the city on this very exciting preservation effort. Thank you.
Thank you. James Hawkins.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name is James Hawkins. I am a member of the Creeks Advisory Committee, but today I'm here to speak on behalf of Heal the Ocean. I'll keep it brief because I think everything that's been said has been said that needs to be said. But I will say that, Arroyo Creek feeds into one of our most chronically polluted beaches, at least when it's raining. This project will be a boon to water quality, and we fully support its approval and applaud the Trust for Public Land in bringing this project, and Creek staff in bringing this project to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Hillary Hauser.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, honorable members all, Hillary Hauser from Heal the Ocean. First of all, Heal the Ocean thanks big time the Trust for Public Land, the Creeks and Parks and Recreation Department under Jill Zachary, and the Creeks under Cameron Benson has just been doing wonderful work with Measure B money. The Heal the Ocean, when we first started, rabble-roused for Measure B to pass. And then we started rabble-rousing on this property. And this is a momentous day, it's a happy day, and we just have one word for this recommendation, and that's yes. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes public comment. It's to the council. Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, two watchwords come to my mind when this item came up. And one of them is that Santa Barbara experiences a miracle about once every decade. And the second watchword is all's well that ends well. The miracle every decade, thank goodness, several of these have occurred in the Las Positas Canyon, Arroyo Burro. You have even Hendry's Beach, obviously Douglas Family Preserve. Ealing's Park, 1 and 2. Each one of these is an amazing contribution to the community's open space, and they're near one another or next to one another. And so cumulatively, 1 and 1 doesn't make 2. It makes much more. So we now have this lung of Santa Barbara, as it's been called, really coming into fruition here and being improved. There are other miracles every decade. I won't try and go into them here, but it's amazing that this city still can get a hold of land in nice chunks and make them into community open space, even as the urban pressures grow year by year and values and so forth. So this has been obviously a tough fight, a tough road to hoe, and I know All's Well That Ends Well is a comedy, and this has not been a comedy. This has been really tough, and there's been many folks that have had a hard time with this effort along the way. But I'm so glad and so grateful to all concerned, staff, citizens, that I've been, at least the vision that I had for this property for several decades is now before us on the cusp of being open space in perpetuity.
Mr. Vincent, did you want to add something?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. While it wasn't covered in your staff report, I do want the council to have the confidence that this acquisition of land does qualify for a categorical exemption for the California Environmental Quality Act for the preservation of habitat as well as the conservation of fish and wildlife.
Okay. Mr. Hart?
Well, I think that Councilmember White said it well, except that I don't know that it's actually a miracle. I think it really is determination and focus and hard work. People for a very, very long time, people in this room, people that aren't in this room, have really had this vision in mind and have been working diligently behind the scenes, keeping the pressure on the council, keeping the pressure on the community, and finding funding sources where they didn't exist, looking under every haystack and making this happen. So it really is a fantastic day. It kind of speaks to Santa Barbara's commitment to this kind of process, and I know there will be other victories like this in the future, things we can't even really see today that are going to come to fruition. But special thanks to Carla Frisk for her work way back, Mark Chatillo, Mr. Size, Mr. Moldever, Friends of Arroyo, Eddie Harris at Urban Creeks Council, the folks at Heal the Ocean, who really keep the fight going all the time to have the vision executed through hard work. We just live in a very special community, and we're lucky to have these days, and we should savor them.
Mr. Francisco?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I certainly will support this, and creek restoration is a good thing. I do, however, believe that this was the second best alternative that was available to us. The city repeatedly turned down private development efforts in this area that included creek restoration as part of the development at no cost to the city. The $4 million we're talking about here, every one of them is a tax dollar. So though we will accomplish something good with this, we are accomplishing it at a very high price. And we're also taking more land off the tax rolls. So that's the choice that this council made. And under the circumstances, it's the last best one available to us. So I'll support it, but I wish we weren't here.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm glad Mr. Hawkins mentioned the beach and how our shoreline will benefit and all the users there and the marine environment that this project, when it's functioning as a water quality function, will improve the water that gets to the beach, and that is huge. I acknowledge that $2.7 million is a lot of money. It's what Measure B was meant for. But for this to become a new public open space, I'm reflecting that I think this will be one of those things on my deathbed that I'll be thinking, yeah, this was a great vote that I'm proud of. Really, really meaningful forever. Oh, yeah, and who mentioned, let's make sure it's forever? Someone was, maybe Mr. Chatillo, you were saying, let's not leave a loophole so that, we might, I don't know, put a Ferris wheel down there or something someday. It really should be natural open space. And I'd like to add a name, Councilmember Hart, of David Pritchett, who came at this from his knowledge of botany and the relationship that a creek has with fish, birds, mammals. This was a special place to a lot of people, and it is a day to reflect on all the characters and all the players who made it happen. May I make the motion, or did somebody do that?
We have a couple of other comments.
Okay.
First. Yeah.
Thank you. Then
I'll just thank you. I just first want to thank all of you again for your all the work to get to this point. It's a long and winding road to get to this point. And a slight correction of history here: the city as an entity actually approved developments a number of times. Not my vote, but 5-2 votes a number of times. Majority of Planning Commission members, not Mr. White's votes each and every time. So the city actually did push this forward, and it was the community who rose up and said, no, not good enough. And not only just to say not good enough, we have a better idea of how to get to a place where we think we have the best use of the property and a way to try to fund it. So, it went through a very roundabout way to get here, and had we had Measure B monies back, I think in 2000, I've said this many times, I think the city may have purchased it back when it was $1.5 million. I think that was the purchase price back then. And I want to add actually one other entity and group of people to thank, and that's the property owners. They didn't have to do this. They could have stuck their ground and said, we want to do 4 big homes at the end of Allen Road and get what we can out of it. But this is a partnership with the property owners and the attorneys involved in that as well, and let's not forget them. And they're getting just compensation for this parcel, but I think they are a willing partner in this as well throughout the process, and it would not have happened with Mr. Lee and with the advice of Mr. Americana and others involved. So I'd like to add them to the thank you list. But really, I think the tenacity of this community, not only even a ballot measure where people said loud and clear, the people of Santa Barbara said, we want this to be open space. We don't want a property there and development there for a variety of reasons, makes this vote extra special. And to know we have a very well-run Creeks division who looks long-term and see how we can save the money and keep it in a reserve policy so that when issues like this come up, we have the opportunity to grab onto it. And we know we'll leverage that money coming back in terms of the restoration projects to come. So I think it's a momentous day and a lot of people involved in it as well. I was going to... Mr. White asked to make the motion earlier, so I was going to let him do that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I move that the City of Santa Barbara appropriate $2.7 million from Creeks Restoration and Water Quality Improvement Fund reserves to cover a portion of the $4 million purchase, and authorize the city administrator or his designee to execute documentation necessary to accept title to the property from TPL for future creek restoration and open space park purposes, subject to final approval by form by the city attorney.
Second. Okay. Fine. Right. Well, good. Right. Any other questions or comments? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Great. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. All right. Big deal. We can take a 10-minute council break, and we'll get the last two items. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to call the City Council meeting back to order. If we could have item number 13.
Stage 3 drought update.
Mr. Hagmark.
Madam Mayor, council members, Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager, here for another Stage 3 drought update. Today we'll be going over how the community has been responding in its conservation efforts. We do have some fantastic aerial footage of the reservoirs and their current status. Lake Cachuma operations. Lots going on at Cachuma right now, and so I'm going to brief the council and the public on that. Capital projects and water conservation program highlights. Graphic we've been seeing for a long time here. We have the dotted gray line, which is planned demand. We have the dotted red line, which is the baseline for our water conservation target, and we have the drought target of 25% conservation. You'll notice that in May, this time frame right here, the council really got the message with Stage 3, and we've seen some tremendous conservation. For the month of August, we saw 35% reduction in water usage from August of 2013. That is some impressive numbers. August was a very, very warm month. Where does that put us since declaring a Stage 3? Approximately 37% cumulative reduction. If you were to look at this, we're talking about this area now between 25% conservation and what we achieved. This is approximately 1,000 acre-feet of water that has been saved since we declared Stage 3. So who's conserving? What we're seeing, and this is our biggest user, is the single-family residential customer. And we've seen a 30% conservation from that group, which is fantastic. There is the most discretionary water usage there, and so we're pleased to see that high of a response. As far as multifamily residential, 18% conservation. Again, a little more hardened water usage, not as much discretionary outdoor water usage, but still respectable conservation from that customer class. Commercial industrial, again, another hardened water user, in the sense that there's not a lot that they can cut without cutting customers or cutting products, whatever it is that they're in the business of. Irrigation for residential and commercial, we saw a tremendous response, which is fantastic. Lots of messaging. Ms. Ward will be going into all the work that she's been doing to make sure our irrigation customers are well informed in how to reduce their water usage. Irrigation for parks, recs, and schools, 15% conservation. I'll dig into the actual water usage for parks here in just a second. Agriculture at 1%. This is actually on par with where we thought. Remember that our ag users make up a very, very small percentage of our overall water usage, and we have them on water budgets based on what type of crop they're growing and the weather. So they're already on a very tight budget, and anything below that budget basically means lost production. So a total water usage for ag is about 140, 150 acre feet a year. So really a small number. And then, of course, our recycled water, because the facility is down, we are asking our customers to conserve, and they've gotten that message, and we do appreciate that. So within the tiers, we wanted to take a look at where the savings was coming in the tiers. We have our 2013 single-family residential usage here, which is just over 3,500 acre-feet a year. And now in 2015, we saw about a 500 acre-foot drop in Tier 3 water usage and about a 500 acre-foot drop in Tier 2 water usage. It's fantastic. Multifamily and saw a similar reduction, much smaller, about 300 acre-foot reduction overall. Again, a much more hardened water usage there. So Parks and Rec, they've been racking up some great conservation. They came out in 2014 with a plan to deal with the drought and obviously to save some very precious specimens and a lot of our street trees. The golf course itself has had a 25% conservation in its water usage. Parks, which encompasses the largest water usage, is 38% conservation. This is spectacular. 21% for recreation. This would be like Los Baños, the bathrooms. These are things that are a little more difficult to conserve, but still overall 31% for Parks and Rec. One of my points in putting this in here is showing that the city is pulling its weight as well. When we're asking the community to conserve, we're also doing our part and also balancing that with the needs of a community for our parks and outdoor spaces. Today I have for you some great aerial footage that we put together to help the folks on this side of the hills see what's going on with our water supplies on the other side, mainly Cachuma and Gibraltar. So we're going to start off with, you can see how dry it is. We're here at Gibraltar, just south of the dam. And this is the plunge pool right below the dam. You can see kind of the high water marks and where it usually sits. Again, just extremely dry. Usually you see some seepage coming out of the rock from just the natural water on the other side, and so it's just extremely parched back there. See all of our gates. We've been exercising the gates and have them ready in case El Nino does show up this year, but in the event it doesn't, we are planning for continued dry weather. You'll notice the log booms out here. We got them set in place. Those are critical in making sure that no debris blocks the dam or the gates of the dam. You'll notice it looks like there's a lot of water in the lake. The thing is, it's about 18 inches deep. So we tried to get Miss Ward here to walk out there and show us, but unfortunately sink in muck. But there really isn't a significant amount of water here. It's a lot of sediment has built up in the lake, and it appears that there's water there. You'll notice the nice green color. It makes very difficult to treat this water. However, Cater is set up to treat some pretty difficult-looking water. Now here we are at the boat launch at Cachuma. It's a pretty sad situation. The lake is down about 80 feet. The boat launch here over to the right drops off. There's a nice 20-foot drop-off at the end of the normal boat launch. People have to make their way down to the little docks that have been set up down here. If you didn't know what the lake is supposed to look like, there's some awfully pretty meadows that have shown up. You've heard discussions of a dairy remnants of a dairy that used to be down here that's starting to show up. But overall, the lake is at about 17.5% of capacity. They're just wrapping up the Downstream Release, which dropped the lake a good 8 feet And we're going to see here shortly the barge, this pump barge that went online August 24th and is now making it possible to move water from the lake to the south coast. The north portal in the distance here, this is our normal intake where gravity flows usually occur. And in this case, we're having to pump in. But pretty extensive network of piping and pumps to make this our water system continue to function at such low levels. Actually got a picture of the downstream release. This is what was going on for the downstream water rights holders. You see this black pipe here? This is the state water project. It does look somewhat insignificant in comparison to the magnitude of Cachuma, and it does have its limitations on how much water we can release. You'll see the hose coming in over here. That's state water, and this one that's leaking, which is okay, is what's feeding the fish, and it's okay that it's going back into the lake and we're pumping it back up again. As you can see, down 80 feet from its spill elevation, it looks pretty dismal. So this is a graphic I typically show to the Water Commission. It kind of shows how this drought compares to the last drought with the operations of Cachuma. And I think it gives an idea of really what's left in the lake. We declared here's stage 1 in February 2014, stage 2 in May, and recently stage 3. We're following pretty closely to where we were with the last drought. Unfortunately, with the last drought, there was no downstream water rights accumulation of water in the lake, so we at the time had a lot more water that was for member units or for project water. So that's a slight difference. And again, we didn't have state water back then, and we weren't doing fish releases as well. So anyway, we're watching this closely, and we'll be continuing to report on that. The capacity, this was as of 9/11. I think we're at 17.5% now, somewhere in the 32,000 acre-foot range. Of that remaining water, about 3,200 acre-feet is what is left that the city actually has access to and will be relying on over the next year. We do have adequate supplies to get us through this next water year. And remind you, the water year starts October 1st. That'd be next week. So we're just wrapping up the 2015 water year. As I mentioned, the emergency pump project has been playing a vital role since August 24th. And we're already starting planning to relocate the barge in the spring. Should this winter remain dry, we need to move it to a deeper part of the lake, and that comes with an additional price tag. Downstream water rights releases, as I mentioned, are wrapping up this week. And while those fish releases were going, or while the downstream releases were going on, that did satisfy our fish water releases, which was helpful for the month and a half, 2 months that was going on. Satisfied the roughly 250 to 300 acre feet that we normally have to put down for fish habitat. We are still requesting, we are still working under critical drought operations and requesting from the Bureau some lenience in how much water we're putting down. At this point, we still have not gotten any firm answers on that. Tracking of remaining water, this has become a very hot topic amongst the member units, making sure that no one agency steals the water of another agency. And so we have agreed to have the county and COMB, who both have no water rights, manage the data. So everyone's put in exactly what they expect to take out of the lake for the next year, every month. And so COMB and the county will be every month reporting out whether the agency stayed within its planned allocation. And if they exceeded it, we have discussed a recovery plan that we all can kind of understand what everybody's position is. So if people are taking what they said they're taking, then we can rest assured they're not on track to take anybody else's water. So trying to create a transparency, and we do have monthly meetings going on where we're discussing this. Drought response capital projects, recycle water facility. I believe just a few weeks ago you approved the grant, or moving forward with the agreement for roughly $1 million towards the recycled water project, which was fantastic to help offset the cost of that. Startup is scheduled for late October. I'm hearing October 23rd is when they plan to do startup. And Ms. Ward here will be doing quite a bit of public outreach to customers to let them know when we're back online and what the water quality is going to look like so that they can begin to use more recycled water. Groundwater well projects. The high school well is finishing a major milestone with the completion of 3,500 feet of raw water piping. That piping brings it from the high school down to the Ortega groundwater treatment plant so we can treat that challenged groundwater. Finishing the final design of the wellhead improvements, and that should be going out to bid shortly. And the goal is to have this well in production by summer of 2016. The new Alameda well, with construction has been complete, and it is online at 420 gallons per minute, and we're very pleased to have that well now. Desal project status update. August 28th.
Quick question, Vic. Is that about what we expected from the Alameda well?
That's actually more than what we expected, which
great.
is fantastic. Yes.
Terrific.
On August 28th, we issued a notice to proceed to ID Americas. This week, they officially began demolition and removal of the equipment that they will not be using in the reactivation. They have been working diligently on procurement of the long lead time items, such as the membranes and filter parts, along with pumps that are going to take 9 months to get here. Water production is anticipated to begin in late September of 2016, and the final contract is actually due to be complete October 7th. At this point, I want to turn it over to Ms. Ward.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Madeline Ward. I'm the acting water conservation coordinator. And in the spirit of back to school, I'm going to share with you some of our water education programs. We've had many of these programs since the 1980s. They're very popular, and they're something that are ramping up again as the school season begins. So we offer free in-class presentations for K through 6th grades. These presentations are tailored to the grade level, and they are aligned with the Common Core Next Generation Science Standards and the Education in the Environment Initiative curriculum. It covers a wide range of topics, including where our water comes from, the water cycle. We sing a very popular water cycle song with the students, where water goes, and also saving water inside and out. Also, for our 6th grade students, we partner with Southern California Gas Company to offer what's called the Living Wise Home Efficiency Kit. It includes a curriculum for the teacher and one of those kits to go home with every student to make efficiency repairs in their homes. We also offer free musical assemblies for elementary schools, and this is co-funded by the County Water Agency. It's called H2O, Where Did You Go? And it's provided by Shows That Teach, which is a group that travels all over Southern California. They have many songs that highlight water cycle, the importance of groundwater, drought, and conservation, and the bottom picture is the ever-popular teacher song and dance, where they make them do a hula about the water cycle. We also offer free field trips to the El Estero wastewater treatment plant. This is for grades 3 and up. It's a full tour of the facility as well as the lab. We take them into the lab to show them what's going on under the microscope, what you can't see to the naked eye. And free buses are available for schools in the city's service area. And I do want to call your attention to our public tour, and that will be this Saturday as a part of Creek Week. And for more information, please go to sbcreekweek.com. This year, I'm pleased to say that we reached 4,000 students, last school year. And in addition to our elementary programs, we do have programs for the older students as well. For junior high, we have a water activities manual for teachers that includes curriculum, lesson plans, quizzes, etc. And we also sponsor a special award at the County Science Fair that recognizes students that create a project that has to do with water supply reliability or conservation. For our high school students, we have our Waterways High School Video Contest. It's in its 15th year this year. We will be soliciting videos this fall and spring from the schools and choosing our winning video next May. Once those winning videos are chosen, they will be played in the the local movie theaters before the movies that are playing. And we're here for any other questions.
Great. And I think Mr. Walker left. He was the only speaker slip for here. So any questions or comments to the council? I guess you've said it all. Wow. We're probably holding on. Right. Let it rain, right? Bring me some water. There we go.
Madam Mayor, if I could.
Yes, go ahead.
I have a suggestion. We have done so well in conserving water, better than any place in the state as far as I know. I wanted to ask if you would consider writing Jerry Brown and saying, why don't you come down and give us some sort of commemorative award or something? Get recognition. It would be great, and maybe we could get him here and get some...
Get some kudos.
Good publicity. Would you do that?
I'm going to the League of Cities thing in the end of the month. I'm sure he'll be there. Well, I'm sure he'll love an invitation to Santa Barbara, right? Who doesn't like an invitation to Santa Barbara? We can show him lots of stuff.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Why not? No asking, no getting. Okay. Any other questions or comments? We can. All right. So why don't we then? Thank you. That's just receiving a report. So we'll move on to item 14.
Contract to provide desalinization subsurface intake initial screening analysis for a potable reuse feasibility study.
Right. Mr. Hagmark.
Madam Mayor, Council, Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager, here today to talk about Phase 2 of the subsurface intake and potable reuse feasibility study. Give an overview, discuss a little bit about our approach and the scope and cost and schedule and recommendation. So as the council may remember, on September 23rd, 2014, we had a very in-depth discussion about desal. And as a part of that discussion, the council directed staff to come back and study subsurface intake alternatives and potable reuse alternatives. Subsequently, on January 29th and 30th, we met with the regional board as part of a NPDES permit amendment, and they included that language into our permit amendment, and we included some timelines with that. The first was the submittal of our work plan, which was due August 31st, and that was what Phase 1 was, the submittal of that, which we did get into the regional board. They're still looking at it, but we successfully met the requirement. And we're moving now on to the second item, which is a presentation of the findings to the regional board by June 30th, 2017. It does seem like a long ways out, but there are still a lot of work to get done. There's 3 phases to the study. Phase 1, as I mentioned, was the work plan. Phase 2 is the initial screening analysis of the desalination subsurface intake alternatives, and then completion of a potable reuse study. Phase 3 would be to further evaluate the subsurface alternatives that come out of the screening. So a summary of the Phase 1 work: we engaged the regional board staff on the work plan development. We also brought in the independent technical advisory panel. They were retained by the National Water Research Institute, and is a panel of experts put together in the field of subsurface intake and potable reuse. We conducted a public meeting in early August and received comments not only from the public, but from the panel that were incorporated. The comments that were received by the public summarized support for increased water reuse. We heard water reuse quality concerns, energy required for new water sources, concerns about how we're going to power these energies or the water sources, concerned water use injection will affect groundwater quality, concern that screened ocean intakes will damage marine organisms, and that the fact that it is not consistent with the Ocean Plan Amendment, which is true. This isn't a requirement. We are not working under the Ocean Plan Amendment. Our NPDES permit was found that we were an existing facility, and therefore not a requirement that we comply with the Ocean Plan Amendment. Ocean Plan Amendment on the fact that we study before moving forward with any project. That was really the element of the Ocean Plan Amendment that we're not in compliance with. Comments by technical advisory panel. A total of 50 comments were received from the panel. The Corollo and engineers' response to the available review of the city clerk's office and NWR website. We've put all this stuff on the website for people to review, trying to make this as transparent as possible. I see the biggest change that came out of it was the removal of fatal flaw, which we had put in there, and changed it out with initial screening analysis. The feedback we got from the panel is that some of these items truly were viable options, but didn't fit within what we were looking at, and fatally flawed seemed like the wrong terminology to use on it. And so we've adjusted that in the work plan. So now we're looking at phase 2, and the scope of work for phase 2 is actually to complete the feasibility study for potable reuse and provide. We're going to go ahead and look at the regulatory and permitting requirements that do exist right now just for indirect potable reuse, but we will compile that. The technical advisory panel will have a public comment on initial screening. So will do very similar to the subsurface. We will do an initial screening process. The public meeting for this will be sometime in the January, February timeframe will be that public meeting. The consultant will be looking to 20 potable reuse project alternatives that they'll be bringing forward. With that, they will be developing from each one of the viable alternatives what kind of capacity is really available from those alternatives. Then there will be a draft feasibility report and another public meeting to review that draft before it is finalized, and we hope to have that done by summer of 2016. Is there any questions on the scope of work for the potable reuse work? I'm going to move on to subsurface, but we will not be gathering costs in this scope of work. That doesn't preclude us or the council from directing staff to do that in the future, because we will be bringing this item back and summarizing it as we move into phase 3. That would be the opportunity if the council wants to direct staff to do something. Where staff is on this is there are so many things happening in our water supply related to the biological opinion with Cachuma, related to the safe yield of Cachuma. We have desal coming online and what its role is. Before running off and getting cost estimates for potable reuse, we wanted to make sure we're asking the right question. What is the capacity we need of potable reuse? Because that's going to depend a lot on those costs and how far and what's viable. And so we feel like what we need to do is kind of understand some of the pieces of the puzzle need to get an answer to. Cachuma, desal, and then this kind of feathers into our long-term water supply planning, and we can ask that question of what we need X amount and what will it cost to do that, and that's the next part of studying potable reuse, but it's not part of this scope of work that we're doing as part of this regulatory requirement. So the scope for phase 2 related to subsurface, again, we're going to be performing extensive studies of the geophysical condition, tsunami hazard, sea level rise, sediment transport, determining what is the suitable capacity given the constraints that we have, determining the regulatory and permitting requirements that would go into it, pull that together for an initial screening that will be with the advisory group and the public looking for comments. Following that, whatever survives that initial screening then moves on to phase 3 for additional research and study. And so one of the things that we're obviously looking at is what is the maximum capacity out of the various potable reuse options and the capacity out of the various subsurface intake alternatives. It will require further study, and alternatives that are technically feasible will be evaluated for economic, environmental, and sociological impacts. So where does that take us? The first phase was approximately $344,000. Right now, the contract before you is for $672,000. And the feasibility for phase 3 has estimated right now at $1.1 million, depending on how much, what comes through the initial screening process. All intended to have our final presentation to the regional board by June 30th. So the recommendation for council today is authorize a contract with Carollo Engineers for $672,042 to provide a desalination subsurface intake initial screening analysis and potable reuse feasibility study.
Okay. All right. Any questions? We do have some public comment. Okay. Missy Zeiskoff, why don't you come on up? And then James Hawkins.
Missy Zeitzoff, having to admit once in a while I don't understand things. I do not understand why the staff report includes the Regional Water Quality Control Board's adopted amendment to the El Estero wastewater treatment plant. In the same conversation as the desal plant. This is very confusing to me. I grew up on learning about sewers in Malibu. That was a big issue for us. I see the words potable reuse feasibility study again in the same sentence as the desal subsurface intake initial screening analysis. I'm not understanding the intersection of these two issues. One is to get us water and to do it in an ecological manner from the ocean, clean it, drink it. But what is all this reuse of potable? Could someone explain? Because that certainly did not explain it to me. I was hoping it would, and I read the staff report on the agenda report. Are we maybe talking about using some of our wastewater and cleaning it to a degree that we then drink it? And I do remember in August in The Independent, there was an article written by someone I highly respect, and I won't even say the word, but it started with P. I say toilet to tap. That's a nicer way to say it. Will someone please explain this to me?
James Hawkins, and then Hillary Hauser, you're waiving your 2 minutes to Mr. Hawkins. So, Mr. Hawkins, you have up to 4 minutes.
I'm glad I have a little bit of extra time now to explain the process behind potable reuse. Essentially, there's two different types of potable reuse projects. There's indirect potable reuse, which is the only kind of project that is permitted in California today, where you go through highly advanced water recycling treatment processes to produce a potable, purified water resource that can be used to recharge groundwater supplies. That's indirect potable reuse. Direct potable reuse, which is not yet permitted in California and is being examined by the State Water Resources Control Board, allows you to, I would say, take a more direct route to reuse of this water, the purified water resource, but it is not toilet to tap. No matter what is permitted in California, there will always be a step between the advanced water treatment and your household tap to make sure that all potential harmful constituents have been removed. That's what the engineered storage buffer will do. And that would be, we're not sure what that will look like in Santa Barbara, but there will be something like that in the end. Now to get to my regular comments. I first want to commend staff's excellent work in managing this drought. You know, the conservation programs we have implemented have just been stellar. Like the council was just talking about, staff and the city honestly deserves an award for everything they've done. I want to commend council and staff for delaying the desal decision for as long as possible. I don't think anyone took solace in that decision, but it was really the last possible supply that we had in that immediate moment. We spoke before the council almost a year ago to the day regarding our proposal for a potable reuse facility feasibility study through RMC Water and Environment. Following council's excellent resolution directing staff to explore potable reuse, we put our own study on hold as the current Corollo study was developed. We've been very encouraged with the National Water Research Institute process for this study to date and have had the opportunity to meet with staff to discuss our concerns with the proposed feasibility study. We come here today out of a desire to be on the same page as staff and the city, because implementing any potable reuse project will take a concerted effort from a diverse coalition. With that said, we do have outstanding concerns with the proposed study, because as currently designed, it will not allow for the full analysis of potable reuse feasibility. Simply put, we believe this study cannot wait. We must pursue an expanded recycled water plan now, not later. We cannot wait until all information on Cachuma is available. We cannot wait until the next long-term water supply plan commences. And we cannot wait for an end to this drought. The fact is that the information gleaned from the complete analysis of potable reuse is relevant and pertinent even today, because a potable reuse project could be used to augment the desalination plant's current capacity, replace it outright, or expand the city's water supply beyond the desalination plant's current capacity. It is important to note that Heal the Ocean's own research, as shown in our recently released white paper, which I believe you all received a copy of, shows that potable reuse could be cheaper and less energy intensive than desalination. We cannot wait to pursue a water supply with so much potential to the city. Our recommendation to council is simple: direct staff to modify the work plan as proposed so neither the production or recharge capacity of a potable reuse project prevents the full social, environmental, and economic feasibility analysis of potable reuse. We cannot wait. 5 years from now, I do not want us to ask how much better off we'd be if we had a potable reuse project recharging our groundwater or a first of its kind direct potable reuse project in place. We must move forward with full analysis of potable reuse feasibility and an expanded recycled water program. We cannot wait. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it's to the council. Mr. Hart?
All right, so I want to understand more the difference between staff's position about the analysis of the potable reuse feasibility and Heal the Ocean's position. And I think when I was speaking with Ms. Bjork about this, it has to do with whether you do 35% design for the potable reuse facility. Is that fundamentally the difference in?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hart, we did meet yesterday with Hillary and James and talked about it. And fundamentally, I think we're on the same page in this. It's just a matter of the steps that we go through to get there. I hear their urgency and appreciate their passion to make this happen, but we see it more as an iterative process in a bigger picture of our supplies, and we think we need to gather this information. This is going to be immensely critical in helping us to develop our water supply plan. We don't believe that potable reuse really is viable for another probably 10 years. We feel it's still out there. There's some big agencies that are experimenting with it. Obviously, the regulators just want to make sure that when this is implemented, there isn't a problem. Because if there's a problem, it's going to steer people away from it for decades to come. And so I think they're cautiously moving forward with it, which is frustrating. I don't think it's a matter of if, but when. And we feel at this point that the best information we can gather is what is the capacity and what are the options for actually implementing some type of potable reuse project. We don't feel that there would be any value in developing costs at this point. We feel that potentially could scare a lot of people off, because if we're out there trying to implement this huge potable reuse project, millions and millions of dollars could tarnish that approach. And what we want to do is be a little more surgical. Here's our water supply plan. Here's how potable reuse could fit in. We need a capacity of X. These are the options that develop that would meet that criteria. And then we'd go off and explore those as part of another phase of the potable reuse study. We certainly don't see this as the end of the road.
So are you going to end up backing into the analysis for the long-term water supply as part of this effort? I mean, it sort of sounds like we have a lot of different things moving at different speeds that are interconnected. And ultimately, it would be great if we had an update to the long-term water supply so that all these conversations would nest within that. But we're in the middle of a drought, and we're building a desal plant. We're talking about negotiating with Montecito about using the facility in a regional way. Then you've got these requirements for the regulatory agencies that you have to meet and to meet these milestones. So you've got a lot of things on your plate, and you're trying to manage that workload and still generate as much information as you possibly can to inform this larger conversation. And what I think I'm hearing you say is that you want to ultimately develop the information that Heal the Ocean is asking for, but that there's just a practical reality of how you can manage this workflow over the next period of time. Is that essentially what you're telling us?
You nailed it. Yes.
Okay. And I understand that. And I understand what Heal-the-Ocean is advocating for, and I agree with it. And I think that the art here is the balancing of the timing of that. And it sounds like this is not the final decision about that there will be an incremental check-in as we go along this process, and that we may be able to revise that, the scope of this feasibility study to include these costs if it makes sense at that time as these other things resolve themselves. And so is that true too, that this is not the last opportunity for us to address this issue?
Absolutely, and I'd add to that, Councilmember Hart, that we can move along with it, not in the work plan. We could move along with it and study it to whatever detail we want, independent of meeting the timeline that we have to do for the permit. And I hear their concerns that they don't want to see this languish after the permit requirements have been done, and I given the council's response, I doubt that this will be set aside, but continued to look at. And I just think it's the timing of when you gather those pieces and put them together, because there are so many right now. And it's like to remind people, we are still in the emergency right now. And, looking forward to doing the planning when this is kind of doing planning during emergency, which is really difficult. When I have people with level heads, and doing it during an emergency is kind of a tough time. And we want things to kind of settle down and understand where we kind of end up with Lake Cachuma, and like I said, where we are with desal and our partnerships. And so I think that's the kind of the best time to start looking then at additional costing information and what actual capacity we do need from potable reuse.
I think that makes sense, but I do, and I understand the challenge of planning while implementing and thinking about the next increments of capital investments. And it is a challenge without all the information. So we're never going to get to the perfect place where all the information lines up to make this simple. It's just compound and complex, and it will continue to be that way. But I am very interested in potable reuse, direct potable reuse, the potential for that in conjunction with what we're doing with the desal plant. I think there's lots of economies of scale here potentially, and the more information that's available earlier, will help inform smart decisions down the road. And I do have tremendous confidence in staff's ability to get this information to us, as demonstrated by what we've just achieved in the last 2 years, moving the ball from zero to being on the cusp of having the desal plant in place in time for us if we don't get rain this year. And I want to assure Heal-the-Ocean that, from my perspective, this isn't going to fall off the table, that we're going to continuously be monitoring this. I know you are. And we appreciate that. And your regional engagement on this issue, I think, is extraordinarily important, too. I think, our staff is very focused in on our needs, our local community resource needs. You're helping to provide a bigger perspective beyond just the city of Santa Barbara, and that this area is ripe for that kind of cooperation and collaboration. There just seems massive economies of scale of working beyond our borders. But we, I think, have been very fortunate to have staff focused on our needs immediately, because we've been able, and as a result, we've been able to achieve a lot in a very short period of time. So I'm confident that we will be able to marry these interests, at the right time, that this opportunity won't be lost. But I understand why staff wants to focus, their laser on what they need to do right now.
Dwight?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I thought the Heal-the-Ocean folks made one comment that I want to second, and that is that our staff now is confronted, is on the hot seat every day with a very low margin of error, and is really being put through their paces. And we really do need to thank and commend our water staff, Joshua, led by Joshua Hagmark, and Kelly Dyer, his associate, and Madeline Ward, for doing this work every day under a lot of pressure and difficult circumstances. And so thank you for raising that point. I should have said something on the previous item, but the work that's going on every day and this is an example of it, where, my goodness, in the middle of this, we're doing a study on desal subsurface intake, and yet we're trying to just manage our water supply at the same time. So in that vein, I will make the motion that Council authorize Public Works Director to execute the agreement as outlined in the staff report.
Moved by White, seconded by Francisco. Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just had a follow-up question, though, on the Phase 1, Phase 2. Are there the proportional effort between potable reuse study and subsurface intake? Is that to be determined? Has that been determined in terms of what? Because if we talk about both of them at the same time, yeah, they're two completely different issues, and I think Heal the Ocean makes some excellent points. And our subsurface intake would be an enormously expensive long-term future project, if I'm not mistaken, on what it would take to actually accomplish SSI, right?
SSI or potable reuse?
Or no, the subsurface intake. Well, I mean, both of them. You've talked about that, but really, we've got the subsurface intake as part of the thing because we have to, I guess. But really, the feasibility of doing that is also a very, very big and long-term and much more expensive option that we haven't included in our initial plan. So I'm just wondering, in terms of proportion of where we're going with the studies, Phase 1, Phase 2, then Phase 3 has another $1 million line item that's not part of this today's resolution, but still, I'm curious because, I mean, at what point do we say one or the other, or do we have to do them together, or is there a sense of, are they 50-50? Well, I mean, when we study these things, how are we going to, are they joined at the hip forever?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, we are actually looking at them independently, and when we get done, we'll have information on the capabilities of both. So that's kind of what we're going through here, so that we have good information to move forward with long-term water supply planning, and the council can give direction on whether we want to move in a combined gesture to try and blend of some sort, or we want to start focusing our energy on potable reuse because that's where we want to see more development of water supply. But we'll actually have information at that point to say what's available, how much we can get from those supplies. And so, but it is a long road ahead. I mean, the subsurface, I think that would be many years of permitting to make that happen if it was financially feasible. And the potable reuse, like I said, I don't want to be the wet blanket. I do think it's going to take probably 10 years, and that would be government at the state level moving pretty quick to get some regulations in place, and that's a drought that's needed to really put the fire under them to move along. But there are a lot of, even with that, as you can imagine, from my perspective, there's a piloting phase. We're going to want to certainly make sure we can do it on a pilot phase. So there's several years of piloting any type of potable reuse. And I think that's, there's a process of getting the public on board. I'm just glad to hear Heal the Oceans. We're going to need all the support possible to make people feel comfortable with this. But, bringing them to a pilot facility, having them see how it works, taste the water, for us, building the confidence that this is something we can reliably, trust to distribute in our community.
And as far as, once again, going back on subsurface intake, are we planning to, obviously we're going ahead with the project we have, are we planning another intake at some point in some place, or replacing the one we're going to use, or is we're just studying the concept?
Just studying the concept.
You remind me with the subsurface intake, back up. The current desalination project, the $55 million, what portion of that had to do with the intake part? As I remember, it's a small portion of the $55 million.
Madam Mayor, I believe it's about $3 million, or it might even be less than that, is associated with the screens and rehabilitation of our existing inlet structure.
So if sometime in the future, through permit requirements or whatever, we need to, and it's feasible, and we have to somehow go through a subsurface intake, assuming we're going to stay with desalination, the bulk of the funding, where the spending that we have for this plant will still be intact. It would just be redoing something would be about a $3 million hit, not a $50 million hit, because everything else will still be needed onshore. Okay, I wanted to get those numbers right because that has come up a couple of times of short-term, long-term process. Okay, so that's on subsurface intake, and of course the planning and permitting and the environmental impacts of digging a trench or whatever it is, that'll take a very long time to do. Okay, so now on the potable reuse. So I think I'm trying to understand, because I agree, I think everyone's on the same page where we want to go, and I want to thank Heal the Ocean not only for continually to come here and be good cheerleaders for what we're doing, but also speaking to a whole variety of people, finding funding sources to get things done, partnering with the city. It's been, I think, a great partnership. So I'm trying to understand the timing differential of what they're asking for versus what staff is suggesting. And so I guess my question is, I have two questions. One is, take away the state requirements. Let's say the Water Quality Control Board said portable reuse, we can start tomorrow. Just that they changed the rule. What's the difference in timing of what Heal the Ocean is asking versus what you're suggesting in terms of moving forward with a feasibility study or moving, towards implementation? That's one. And then, is there anything in this item that we're approving today that prohibits us from moving things forward in a more expedited way? I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, there's nothing in here that prohibits this. This would be the natural progression.
Right.
Should the council want us, after we finish this phase, which they said will be done by the summer, if you would like us to move forward with cost estimating on some of these, we certainly could do that. That would be something the council, we could direct staff to do. A recommendation is to probably hold off because it all depends on when this drought ends. If it ends this winter, which I welcome a reprieve, then we can start really getting a better idea of where we are headed with our long-term water supply plan, and that would be the natural progression to ask, how much do we need from potable reuse, and start to explore that. If we are going to go through another year to drought, I think this document is still valuable, sits on the desk. It tells us how much is capable, but we don't know all the pieces of the puzzle, and it seems a challenge to run out there and start getting cost estimates for a supply we don't know how much we need.
And what's the timeline of this particular phase here that we're approving today?
It will have results from the feasibility of the potable reuse specifically by this summer. So springtime, we should have results of that.
So really between now and summer, we're moving along in the same pace and manner as we would if we were just moving right ahead towards the potable reuse. But we're going to have a decision point in the summer to figure out what's going on and how to either continually move forward and do cost estimates or hold off. Right?
Yep.
Okay. So there's nothing. So I think we'll have to revisit this come summertime anyway, and we'll be coming. I assume we'll be coming. We'll still be seeing a lot of you every month for many months, even into next summer. I mean, imagine even with an El Nino rain year, unless something so dramatic happens that spills Lake Cachuma, and we're just saying the drought's over, we're probably going to still be in some form. We're not going to be at we're not going to be at year one of a water supply management plan. We may, but that's highly unlikely. So we will be back in the summer after this phase is completed, and we have another decision-making point where I think some of the issues that Heal the Ocean's brought up, we can have a better sense of, do we want to push forward a little more quickly or not, depending on the information we have. Does that sound right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, I thought you were looking up something. Okay, well, that helps, and I think we'll just continue to monitor this as we move forward. So any other questions or comments on this? We do have a motion. All right, all in favor? Aye? That's unanimous? Great. Thank you very much, and thank you very much. All right, so Councilmember Committee Assignment Reports. Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Two things from the Arts Advisory Committee. They had a couple of things, one of which was particularly interesting. They've got some new thing, Yes We Can on Milpa Street. It was a really wonderful, imaginative children's art presented from or through the efforts of MCA. Secondly, at the airport, whereas our passenger counts have been going down, in August they started going in the other direction, back up. So I actually went up almost a little over 11%. We're still down year to date by about 7%, but at least maybe this is an indication that the tide has changed, to use a water image.
Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, let's see. Last Thursday, I attended on the mayor's behalf the SB CAG meeting, and at which there was a presentation of the strategic plan update. I'm not going to try and summarize that here. I would ask staff to consider perhaps giving us a little presentation on that at some point in the future. Also, I attended two meetings, a COMB meeting and a Air Pollution Control District meeting, both of which were recruitment meetings. The APCD meeting was an set of interviews with applicants for that position, and the COMB meeting was a preceding step of basically starting the process of recruiting a new CEO.
Mr. Hart?
Last week I attended the MTD long-range strategic plan workshop. They are having another one, I think, in another week. They're working through issues related to their service capabilities over time, looking ahead toward the changing demographics of the community and different ways that they might improve and deliver additional service in public transit realm. And I think the city's a big constituent of theirs in that regard.
Ms. Maria?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On your behalf, on Sunday, I presented a proclamation to honor International Peace Day. People sent their regards to you. I thank the Mindful Warrior Project and the Santa Barbara Resource Group for putting that on. It's nice to spend an hour contemplating peace, personal and worldwide. It was very nice. Food Bank is working with the Westside Boys and Girls Club to bring nutrition and food supply programs to the Westside. It's very nice. A lot of churches and different groups that are working together on that pantry, a healthy pantry at the Boys and Girls Club. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.